Hello, welcome to the Property Lifestyle Mastery Podcast. I'm Jackie Tomes. I'm shortly going to be joined by my good friend and business partner, Dom Beechino. And on this show, we are having open, honest conversations about what it's really like to build a property business that creates genuine freedom and cash flow from those of us who've been there and done it. So we're talking about the highs, but also the lows, and there have been some really bad points and those lessons along the way to ultimately create that holiday every 6-week lifestyle. So we're talking everything up from big picture strategy right the way down to practical details. And today's episode, I am bearing my soul. So this is an introduction to me, where all of this has come from. So I'm sharing the real tough points that I've been through along the way, overcoming my own self-sabotage, challenges with perfectionism, and how going through that has been integral to where we are today. So yeah, get ready for me to bear my soul. Let's do this.
Hello, Jackie Tomes, or Jackie Wigram Tomes, because you got married since I first met you all those years ago.
Very true. Hello, Dominic Beechino, for being really formal about it, aka Dom.
Thanks. So this podcast is going to be about finding out your story and what it is that you overcame, the challenges, the barriers, the mindset, the things that you did, the things that you didn't do, the things you learnt in your journey of how you got to where you are now. Because you have a lot of people who are followers who really admire the lifestyle that you've created for yourself, for you and Dave, living in your motorhome, driving around Europe for like 9-10 months of the year, doing ski seasons. I mean, it is of dreams, what other people dream about, you've actually made a reality. So understanding your journey and how you got there, I think, is something that people are really interested to hear about. I know I certainly love seeing all the stuff that you're up to and how you got there, and it is incredible. So yeah, where would you like to start us off? What would be a good starting point for the conversation?
I think it's we were just talking about before we hit record on the session today, just about the fact that I've done quite a lot of podcasts for different people over the years, and I think it's great, and it's really great to be able to go on and share our story and to be able to help and inspire others. I think the thing that I'm really excited about for the fact that this is our podcast now is that we don't have to shoehorn like 10 years of like what happened, successes, challenges, all into like one half-an-hour episode. And I think I'm really excited by that. So I think for me, I wanted it to be able to just maybe touch on some of the stuff that we don't normally get to talk about, maybe on podcasts, particularly around some of the more personal challenges that there have been along the way. Because yeah, we've had a I was going to say we had a really good run, but actually that's not fair. Like we've done stuff. We've had some successes, or like 15-16 million pounds of deals done since we started 10 years ago. I've worked with lots of different investors, raised millions of pounds in investment. Like that's all the stuff that that's all the headlines that everyone wants to hear about. But it hasn't all been easy. Like there's been some real challenges along the way, and every time we've kind of taken on the next phase of growth, I suppose, like those personal challenges come up more. So I guess I kind of wanted to look from this angle at maybe some of the areas that I've been self-sabotaging along the way, because I think that's what you maybe haven't heard before.
It's so true. It's one of the big kind of almost elephants in the room that people don't tend to talk about so much, is that self-sabotage. It is very easy to learn the necessary information to do well in property, but the biggest barrier is always the person looking at yourself in the mirror, yourself. And so, yeah, what was the first hurdle that you think that you, or barrier, mindset problem that you hit, and how did you overcome it?
I think for me, probably the biggest theme of my life for like the first 30 years was perfectionism. That was like, I think, how it outwardly presented itself. And I think the problem with perfectionism is that actually society really likes it. Like it really encourages us to go for that, and always delivering on what you say, going above and beyond, everything being really well thought through and proofread. And I mean, like we Before property, I was I'm a market researcher. Before that, I was an actor, and which we can talk about in a minute if you want. But I guess it's like I then got into property. Had some successes, and then started getting into mentoring and ultimately speaking. And I think, particularly as I got more into speaking and like sharing the journey that we'd had, like that just was like a raging fire for me, for my perfectionism. And I used to like sit in front of the computer with like trying to create presentations to go out and speak at events, and I'd just be having absolute meltdowns because it was just never good enough. And Dave, my lovely husband, would be trying to like calm me down, but it was such a powerful force within me that everyone really outwardly loved about me, but underneath it all, it was like a really crushing negative influence in my life.
And it was your thinking and feeling that created that crushing feeling, which I think an awful lot of listeners can probably relate to, because there's always somewhere in life where one doesn't feel good enough. And learning to love oneself is one of the sort of key components of
ridiculously hard to do.
Yeah but, and partly because I think our parents always do the best they can given their level of awareness and consciousness, but very commonly parents withhold their love and say you must be like this or else, and they hold back the love unless you are like that. And so as a result, we grow up thinking if we're not like this, we're not worthy. And I think that's common to probably everyone, actually, or certainly 95% of the world.
Yeah, you're right. And I think it's the not feeling good enough thing. Like I would never have thought about that about myself consciously a few years ago. Like was able to like say that I wanted to do something and to go out and make it happen. Like I was like, how could I be doing all of that if I feel not good enough underneath it all? So I didn't really resonate with that. But it's only really been the last few years when I've been becoming more self-aware, and a large part down to the influence that you've had, which I'm excited for us to delve into your story as well, Dom. But like when I've started to strip away the layers of where everything has come from and come down to like what's really underneath it all, which has been a both liberating and very painful process to go through, it's true. Like underneath it all, I have actually achieved all of the successes to this point until maybe like 6 months ago, from a place of I have to do this to be good enough. And therefore, it's great. Like you achieve all of the stuff that society wants you to achieve, and everyone like says, oh, bravo, very well done, you've done this thing that you set out to do and we look up to you. But then you realize that all of that has been built from a very negative place. And that realization that I have made things so much harder for myself along the way, because this driving force was if I don't achieve this stuff, I'm not good enough. And then the subconscious part, which I haven't even been aware of until recently, is I'm not good enough, and so therefore I am not loved, and so therefore everyone will leave me and I will be alone and probably die. Like that's all subconscious. Like I'm totally aware of all of that, but that's like the subconscious story that my body's been running. And so it's been such a liberation to become aware of all of that, and to now this next phase of business growth. None of it is about for me anymore, and maybe we can talk about some of the influences that are driving me moving forwards, but this next part of the journey is about just loving what's going on and it not mattering what actually happens, because I know that I am good enough. I'm probably like 60% convinced that I'm good enough, so we're still working on that, definitely like progress. But I am good enough, and therefore it doesn't matter if I fail at stuff, doesn't matter if I fail publicly at stuff, because none of what anyone else actually thinks really matters. And I think this is probably quite a good thing to touch on in launching this podcast. Like everyone's always been like, gosh, for what you've done, you should have a podcast, you should have a book, you should have all this stuff. And I'm just like, the perfectionist, I think, in me is like, no, I'm not ready. But actually, it's just been really, I think, probably a fear of like really putting myself out there and not minding what happens, and knowing that actually, yeah, so now I'm ready to enjoy it, because it doesn't
Right.
matter what happens. You can hate this podcast and never listen to it again, and I'll still be okay. Like, I'm not going to be in a ditch dead because of it. And
Yes.
that's really why this podcast is happening now, and that it hasn't happened several years ago, when maybe other people who've had slightly different manifestations of those challenges than I have.
It's yeah, really pertinent what you say, because I think it's so relevant to everyone. They come from a position of fear. They take action based and from a position of, fear rather than passion, loving what you do. And I think a lot of people get into property because they think, that there's passive income to be made there, but they don't realize that actually it's a vehicle for your self-actualization. Just like any other career, really, is to find out who you are, what you're best at, and where you can really serve others. And often I believe that everyone who goes through what you've done and gotten to a place that life is more enjoyable, and you feel like you're becoming enough and you enjoy life every day, they've been through the hard times. And so I think to all the listeners who are either they're in the hard times, or maybe not, but if they're in the hard times, know that that is a point of change. So was there a particular turning point for you? Was there a time period? Yeah, what happened that helped enable that change within you?
I think there's maybe a couple. I guess the earlier one would maybe have been more like 5 years ago, when I started to realize, that's when I went to therapy, basically. I can't quite remember the exact trigger, but I guess it just became really clear that the perfectionism was actually ruining my life, is too strong a word, but it was a very negative influence.
Right.
And then I started to delve into where that came from a very cerebral perspective with a therapist, and I started to make a lot of changes off the back of that. Some very important relationships in my life changed off the back of that. Maybe that's a podcast for another day. So that was a very important moment. But for me, definitely some of the more recent stuff is what springs to mind for me more. So I think one key moment was us being in the second lockdown during COVID. Like, I don't know how we managed it. Like, with business, we've always worked damn hard and we've got results.
Yeah.
With the traveling, we've never really worked very hard at it, and it's just happened. So I'm
Right.
trying to bring the travel like vibe into my work life more. But we were in the second lockdown during COVID. Boris Johnson had banned holidays, but because of a magical set of circumstances, Dave and I had managed to get out the country and get to Cape Town, and we were in this strange environment where there were hardly any tourists, so the Airbnbs were just like an absolute steal. So we were in this like villa with like 4-5 bedrooms or something, this massive pool, this view of the ocean and the mountains, and it was just like, the business was great. We just agreed to work with a new JV partner who we were really excited about, with deals going through, and it was just like Dave and I sat in front of the pool and in our deck chairs, and I was like, Dave, is this like more than you've like would ever have imagined that we have? And he was like, yes, I can't believe this is happening. But then I was like, but do you also still have this like background, I can't remember the words I used, but it's like basically this background nagging kind of anxiety that something bad is about to happen, or that something's wrong, or that somehow that this isn't enough? And he was like, yes, I also have that. And it was never a feeling that I'd really been aware of in that way before, because always I'd have that oh, I feel bad because the deal has fallen through, because the refurb's gone over budget, blah, 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 all this external stuff that I'm like, I feel bad because that's happening. So I need to make sure next time the process is better, the refurb doesn't go over budget, and then I will feel good. And I had nothing to blame it on. Neither of any of us had anything we could blame that on. And that was a real light bulb moment that, hang on a second, all of this stuff that we've worked for isn't it. Obviously it's an important part of it, like you want to have the freedom and you want to have the money, but it's not it by itself. And I think that's been a launch pad into a whole new world of exploration about what freedom means and where this, the framework behind this podcast has come from. Yes, you've got to have a good strategy, a really shit hot strategy. Like, it's actually second nature to me.
Yes.
Being really productive. I'm very good at self-managing and helping people to master their time, but that is not enough when it really comes down to it. If you want true freedom, there's this whole other thing that we hadn't got in place, and probably we wouldn't have noticed it had it not been for you coming into our lives, Dom, because obviously I've known you for probably 8 years, I think now, maybe 9 years. But then, we kept in touch, and then, we'd been mentoring other people for many years, and Dave and I, very practical, logistical, detailed, strategic process to everything, which was excellent. But we're finding that we were coming up against some blockages with clients that my bash down the wall approach wasn't working, and I was like, we need something more, and you just were the only person that we thought about that we can explore this with. And so you came into our lives more, and I was like, Dom is going to help our clients a lot. I didn't expect that you were going to also help me a lot in the process, but you were, you said a thing that I didn't understand at all when you said it, and this must have been 2.5 years ago. You were like, you've got to make a plan, say, you've got to have an idea of what you want, you've got to make a plan, then you've got to let it go. And that I was like, that's a ridiculous suggestion, Tom. Like, that doesn't work. I've tried, I haven't got where I am by doing that. So, and that obviously still triggered something within me, and you started suggesting various books to me, and then this Cape Town moment happened, and it all kind of stuff started to just, I guess, unfold for me to go, actually, took me on a journey to realizing that, oh my God, Dom is more right than anything I have done up until this point. Where have you been for the last 10 years? We needed you sooner.
Well, it makes me think of the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I think that's true for everyone, because things come about at the right time when we're ready to hear them. And sometimes they come about and you're not ready to hear them, because I got that concept from a book that I had on my shelf for at least 2 years before I hadn't touched it. So, sometimes it comes in and there's little nudges from the universe to help us in the right direction, but we kind of are stuck in our way of thinking, attachment of, I want this. If I have this in my life, if I have the life by the pool with JV partners and everything else, then life will be brilliant. And of course, it's not, until we realize that it's really all about what's going on inside. The proof and examples are, people who win the lottery, a year later, statistically, they are no happier than they were before. They've got more stuff in their life, and maybe they've lost and gained friends, but it's not, people think that if they have something else in their life that they're going to be happier. But actually, if you start from the inside and work on who you're being and how you're feeling each day and look after that, then the world around you tends to shift. So you said the turning point then was a couple of years back now, back during COVID. And then so what were the changes that you made in your life, and what happened in the business as well?
Yeah, great questions. I think the main change was starting to use meditation as a tool. But our first ever business coach was Elliot Kay, who obviously as well, who was a very important figure in our journey of going from just like haphazardly buying property into actually thinking about what our business strategy was. I remember he used to meditate, and I was like, what a woo-woo thing to do. I'm never going to need that. I'll just like hit my to-do list and manage my time and all that stuff. So then we the right books presented itself, like Total Meditation by Deepak Chopra. I read that and started just creating some time each morning with this, we were a couple of hours ahead of the UK at that point, so there was just this space kind of opened up in the morning, and started to use meditation, I guess at first in a similar way to that I was used, like before I would go to a therapist and have discussions and figure stuff out with them, and they would help me. And this was kind of an evolution to kind of becoming my own therapist, I suppose. Like I would find a quiet space. Deepak Chopra's got this like 7-day get into meditation process, and you ask yourself insights. You basically calm the mind, you breathe, and then you ask yourself for insights. And I would start to get insights that I would have to go to a therapy session from before, just like from myself. And it was It was amazing. And that kind of evolved from there. And I think it's probably, again, a whole podcast episode in the future about meditation and the evolution of it to hopefully break down some barriers in those of you who are listening in your minds that were definitely in mine and Dave's mind. So that was a big change. And then the next big change, which I won't go into detail of because it's kind of hitting on Dave's story, but Dave went through a very tough time from a mental perspective a few months later, and that was really hard for me to watch him go through all of that. Not just because I care about him, but because I subsequently realized that I had made my happiness conditional on his happiness. And subconsciously, I thought that if he wasn't pleased and happy, then I didn't deserve to be pleased and happy. And suddenly, life presented this opportunity for me to realize that that's not the case anymore. Before, if I'd have a bad day, Dave was the strong one. He'd pick me up, and he would help me. And suddenly, he wasn't able to do that anymore. And so this kind of like, I couldn't control how he was reacting and feeling, and he couldn't help me with how I was reacting to it. So suddenly this was like the rug was kind of pulled out from under me, and I had to look at how I was taking responsibility for my own emotions and start to realize how much that people pleasing part of me was sabotaging so much of my life and my relationships, because I had basically said, again, subconsciously, all of this stuff, it's only become more conscious recently, but I felt like I had to take responsibility for the people in my life, and that if those people were not happy, healthy, or having their own challenges, I took those challenges upon myself to solve for them, which there's a whole host of issues which I'm sure we'll find a time to get into. But really, this opportunity with Dave just made me start taking responsibility for my own emotions and not be able to rely on others. And I think that's been a very important next part of the journey, and particularly in starting to realize that all of these times that I have thought of so negatively, like so many challenging things have happened along the way. You get the down vows, you get the builder who screws you over, you make bad hires, like all this bad stuff happens, and you react to it. And I've always thought, that bad thing has happened, I must control for those factors in the future to make sure that's not going to happen again, and therefore I will be happier. And actually was going, what, I actually can't control any of this. All I can do is just show up, take responsibility for how I feel, and then the rest of it will just happen. And that's really been, there's so many different layers as part of all of that, and I don't think the work will ever be done, but just I've seen a huge acceleration in my life of just amazing things just starting to happen without me having to try as hard to control how it happens. And it's a lot more fun. I'm starting to have a lot more fun with my work, and stuff is just flowing. And I guess that's been the main difference. And I'm not sure we've really necessarily seen quite yet the business outputs, maybe some flickers of the difference there, but we haven't truly seen the tangible rewards for that. But I don't really care at this point, because I'm having more fun doing all the stuff that I'm doing, with regardless of what is happening in terms of what the world can see.
Yes, excellent. Can you think of any examples for the listeners of what are things that have become opportunities, and things that have come into your life that you weren't expecting, and possibly partly because of the meditation and your general mental state on a regular basis, because people are like, how do you manifest these things like that? That's not possible. I can't do it. Why can't you? That's why I control. I go for something and I go for the goal. That's why I make it happen. So the idea of doing the opposite of like letting go and not intentionally, well, no, it is intentional, but it's not so attached to the outcome. And so where are you now then, and what's coming next, do you think, that's gonna which excites you? And I
think it's really interesting, because we went and did a very informal like presentation out on the ski slope to some cool property people who were out there, like talking about the structure that we've created around the different areas of freedom.
Yeah.
And one of the great questions was like, so like, what's your objective for this year? Like, what's the strategy? And I'm on a test pilot this year. I have strategized every single year. The business works really well from a strategic perspective. We have the annual goals, we got the rocks, we got the weekly priorities, like it all is very structured and it really works. And that's how I've always achieved stuff to this point. It's like, have a goal, make a plan, knuckle down and make it happen. I read an amazing book last year, which I know you've subsequently read too, called The Surrender Experiment by a guy called Michael Singer. And Michael Singer I've never met him, I've only read his books, but he's been a massive inspiration for me over the last 6 months or so. And The Surrender Experiment, essentially, this guy has achieved incredible things. He's like built up a whole massive community, acquired all this land, and all from being like a yogi hippie guy living in the woods, all this land, ended up running this massive company, and he's done all of it by just not actually planning and just being open to what opportunities present, which is like the antithesis of me. So one of the things that Dave and I have realized, and maybe there's so many episodes.
Yes,
Joe,
there are.
Joe, you're listening back to this, please may you make a list of all the episodes that I've said because I haven't done that. Joe is our a wonderful lady who works with us to support us on all of our marketing, social media, amongst many other things as well, looking after tenants too. So Joe, I know you'll be listening to this. Can you make a list, please? You might have to go back now. So Dave and I have been talking about the fact that if you've been doing things in one specific way, and you want to make it a bit less rigid and structured, you kind of want to come back to the middle. You don't want to be so rigid and structured, but you don't want no structure either.
Yes.
But the problem is, in order to go from being so extreme to the middle, you can't just go to the middle. You have to swing to the other extreme first of all to be able to then come find the homeostasis in the middle. So for me, this year for me, I'm working on trying out the Michael Singer approach of just letting it all go and just seeing what presents itself and not really knowing how it's all going to go, not having a big objective for the year and just like seeing what happens. I think there's a middle ground between the strategy and that side of it, and obviously that's the strategy side of it does work, but I think there's a more enjoyable way if you can bring in some more Michael Singer-esque surrender as part of that. So I will let you know, guys, what that is when I figured it out, but at the moment, I'm letting it all go and I'm just seeing what presents itself and just seeing what happens as an experiment.
This time next year we'll come back and review how it went.
Yes.
That would be a nice thing to do. It really that's a lovely kind of idea to give to people, because often they're looking, so what's the one thing that you can do that's going to make my business go forward? And it's like, it's not one, it's both. It's seeing both sides of that you're doing. So yes, you have intention, you take action, but you also, as you say, do the opposite. You surrender, you let go of the attachment to any particular outcome, and most importantly, enjoy the journey, and you're all fully present every day, and you're doing your best work. It's not as if you're not doing anything. You're being someone who loves their work and is present and is serving others, which is absolutely essential. A lot of people just want to make money and not have to deal with other people. It's like, no, the universe rewards you the most when you're serving others. It's the most fulfilling anyway. So it's seeing the duality and doing both. But I like what you just said about surrendering completely and seeing what happens, and then you can, as you say, review it towards
put my hands together.
Yes.
Awesome. I was trying to think if there's anything else that would be nice to finish on. I guess the final thought I would kind of like to leave everyone with is just around the whole idea of coming back to self-sabotage. I never thought I was someone who self-sabotaged because I always managed to get stuff done, but I now realize I was self-sabotaging, like everyone listening, you're all doing it. You might not necessarily know that you're doing it, but let me help you figure out how you are, because or Dom, because you are. And for me, maybe reframing what that self-sabotage means in reality. And for me, I think self-sabotage and comfort zone really go very hand in hand. You've probably, if you're listening to this, you've probably seen that, what is it? It's like your comfort zone is here, and here's outside of your comfort zone, that's where the magic happens. And I always interpreted that was like, you know, feel the fear and do it anyway, like push out your comfort zone, like make it all happen. And that's kind of what I did, and it, you know, does work to a degree. But really, I look at it from a very different perspective now, which is actually like, your comfort zone isn't necessarily comfortable. And I think that's can be a very confusing thing. Really, your comfort zone is your natural way of being. And we're all so used to just being our natural selves, because that's who we just think we are, that anything that pushes us to be different to that is really what is actually putting you outside your comfort zone. So it's feels different, doesn't necessarily feel scary. It's not necessarily like breaking down a wall to make it happen, but it's basically realizing that if you want to go out and make loads more money, for example, your comfort zone, and you don't have any money right now, your comfort zone is weirdly not having any money, and you don't necessarily know how to be the person that has a lot of money. So therefore you will keep subconsciously finding ways to self-sabotage yourself, to hold yourself to not have any money. And if you just purely come at it from the strategic perspective, which is my natural place to start, it's not enough, because you can do all the right things, but if you're doing it from a place of not believing that it's going to work because you don't really know how to have the outcome and have that money, then it's never going to happen. It's going to be very hard work to kind of break out of it. Whereas all of this other stuff, which is why you being in our lives is so magical, it's like actually realizing some of this other stuff around that comfort zone, that actually if you want to get a different result, you have got to change your natural state of being. So you're going to have to start to question all of this stuff that's underneath, which is scary but also liberating. And that is part of the next part of the journey, which actually makes business growth easier and more fun. And we've been starting to work on this stuff since obviously you came to join our little clan a few years ago, and just seeing the difference in the clients that we work with and the mentees that we have. Oh my God, it's amazing. Suddenly challenges that used to be so big aren't there anymore, and like the results are just coming, and like everyone's like surprised because they're like, I didn't really do anything and it just kind of happened. I just raised 300 grand. I just like mentioned it in a passing comment and suddenly it was there, whereas before I would work 6 months and I wouldn't have got all of that. So I think that for me is one of the reasons that this podcast is going to be just such a joy to go through, to be able to bring together the elements of, you know, strategy and self-mastery from a more practical perspective, but then also bring in this other stuff too, to hopefully start to shine a light on the stuff that's not been seen, which is actually, you know, those of you listening, creating your own version of self-sabotage that you're probably not even consciously aware of right now, because that's exactly what I have found and Dave has found. So yeah, make the journey more fun.
Yes, I love it, Jackie. And you know, if I was to summarize, you know, you're a creative genius. You're a fantastic leader of people, of the team, the company, and you know, your ability to know what someone needs to focus on next, because some people have so many thoughts and they don't know really what they need to focus on. And actually, you know, it's not time management, it's focus management, and what you're brilliant at is helping people see what they need to focus on. So that's a skill set that you bring to everyone in your life that you are part of. And you know, it's not on your own that you can do everything. It's with Dave, it's with myself, it's with the rest of the team. And I think that's something that people miss. They try and do everything themselves, and actually it's when you work with others that magic happens, and that you know your zone of genius, and you can really bring that to the team that you're working with. So yeah, that's probably another podcast. But I love, I'd say I absolutely love working with you, and it's inspiring to be surrounded by other brilliant people who are brilliant in their own way, because we can never be brilliant at everything, but it's when we find our zone of genius that really helps make us feel inspired every day, and excited to get, you know, wake up and everything else. So Anyway,
No.
I'll stop rambling, but that's been really interesting. Not exactly where I thought it might go. I thought we might be going over your entire life story, but actually the more important bits is, what's been going on effectively on the inside, and what are the things that you've overcome, what are the things that have happened, and I think it's fascinating. The
Awesome.
internal journey.
The internal journey and all of the external stuff that will come out. We'll have sessions, podcasts that are more around the different areas of strategy to go into more of that stuff and more of the business journey and the specifics behind that. But I thought this was a much nicer place to start. So I'm looking forward to sharing the stories of you and of Dave on our next couple of episodes as we get into this amazing journey. So thank you, Dom.
Excellent. And thank you to the listeners. Have an awesome day.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's show. If you've enjoyed it and you want to connect with us and reach out, head on over to our website, www.property-strategy.com, where you can find all of our social media links, and you can send us a message on there too. Any questions or comments or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. On the next episode, it's going to be Detail Dave's turn to have the interview tides turned against him. So I'm going to be interviewing him, finding out again from him some of the personal challenges that he's overcome on the route to success, and finding what those big lessons have been for him. And it's probably not what you're going to expect. So I look forward to going through all of that with him on the next episode and seeing you there.